Need to start plugging this hard. The next live recording of the podcast is coming up, man. It's like, 2 weeks away. April 18th, 1 p.m. at Gratitude Brewing with the mighty Lydia Yuknovich. She's the author of The Chronology of Water, Reading the Waves, and the editor of a new collection on menopause called The Big M. We do this event in partnership with the Northwest Review, and we have a student reader from the U of O kind of kick things off before the main event. Should be a rockin' event, and if you're in Eugene or the surrounding areas, find the RSVP link in the show notes or on my various social platforms to reserve a free ticket. Need a head count for this, CNFers. It's going to be a big one, man.
Very loquacious. I will happily just sit down and write like 1,000 words before I know what I'm talking about.
What is the meaning of this pre-Friday podcast? Is this some kind of joke? No. Point being, it's that Atavistian time of the month, and I'm trying to get back in the swing of making the Atavist pod the extra pod, not just another Friday pod. So consider your podcast feed warned, you filthy animal. This is the Creative Nonfiction Podcast, the show where I speak to tellers of true tales about the true tales they tell, how they go about the work, the art and craft of telling true stories. It's me, Brendan O'Mara. Go on, throw your blue shell. I can take it. So last week, I teased, quote, terrible news in that tone, but I guess my tone may have been confusing. Now, Paul Willits, the brilliant author from the UK, he of King Khan fame, of episode 112 fame, he reached out and thought I might be announcing a cancer diagnosis or something just as awful. I have a fear of getting ALS, the Lou Gehrig's disease. That, to me, it must be the most terrifying thing as you just start losing your faculties. Anyway, and I got some other nice notes from people of the keep your head up varietal. Yes, my book proposal was rejected by the imprint I thought would like it the most. And I riffed about that in episode 518's Parting Shots, so I won't rehash it here. It's a drag, because the idea is a good fit. I know it is. But it goes to show that if your book doesn't sell well, and by this I mean the front runner, it becomes a stain on your reputation. It's a shit stain on the underwear of your reputation. Ew. I understand there are far worse things in the world than a little book not getting accepted. But it still stings. You spend a year sourcing up, drawing up a proposal, only for it to be turned down over coffee and assorted pastries, one presumes. Stephen Wood is here. He's a journalist who writes about sports, history, and politics, and he's here to talk about his Atavist story, the Buffalo Raiders, with thousands of U.S. soldiers dying in Vietnam. A group of young Catholics in New York embarked on a secret mission to bring the war machine to its knees. I'll give Stephen a more formal introduction. Top hat and monocle, just before his segment of the show. As you know, show notes to this episode and more at BrendanO'Mara.com. Hey, and I know what you're thinking. Big deal. Who actually goes to the show notes? Well, in the show notes, for a long time now, at least a year, I post links to 500, 400, 300, 200, and 100 episodes ago. Give the backlog a little bit of a blow dry, a blowout. As well as information about the writer, their recommendation, embeds to Pitch Club, which just had a nice little feature written about it for Pointer. Go check that out. Let's keep building out the club. We're taking April off, though. Going to try and build the pipeline a bit. But there's 10 issues of Pitch Club to learn from. But first, as you know, we're going to hear from the lead editor of the piece, and it happens to be the editor-in-chief, Sayward Darby, about her side of the table, which is always fun. Name another show where you get an editor talking about a piece and then the writer also talking about it. Exactly. Hit up patreon.com/CNFpod to contribute to the cause. Also, hit the magazine.atavist.com to read Stephen's story and maybe subscribe. I pay $25 a year to subscribe, and I don't get kickbacks or commissions if you elect to as a result of this show. I do it out of the goodness of my own good heart. My own cold heart. Yeah, I pay too. This guy knows business. This would be me in a negotiation. Mr. O'Mara, I'll sell you that for $5. I'll buy it for $10 and no less. Maybe that's why this podcast isn't more popular. Riff.
you fucking idiot, give me that, which is like how I feel about myself.
Okay, whatever, like, you do you.
If Mars had an area code.
Before I know it, I'm shot with an arrow and this thing has grabbed me.
This is going to have to interest somebody somewhere other than me.
What would you identify as something that, you know, a lot of the really great writers and the great journalists, what are they doing that we can learn from? You know, the best of the best, you know, that you notice, commonalities, if you will.
Oh man, that's such a good question. I think that the best of the best have an incredible amount of empathy. I think that they are people who are not just seeking to listen, but are seeking to understand. And so when they are interacting with their sources, telling their sources' story, which isn't to say they, want to please their subjects or make them look good, but they are approaching these stories with an enormous degree of compassion and curiosity, and are ultimately as interested in sort of the people as they are in the story. And I think that just being a good human,
Yeah.
I think is something that really unites at least the stories that I think are particularly great. Because I think when you come to a project with empathy, you're going to notice things you otherwise might not. If you were just kind of focused on the TikTok of like TikTok being like, the play by play, not the digital platform. I think probably having like an instinct for it, but then also really working to kind of develop that muscle and get better and better and better about being constantly curious about other people and trying to understand other people. I think too, the people who really get how to do this are often always thinking about like the whole picture as they go. Understanding that, the whole picture might take a while to totally come into focus. But I think that, people have in mind, I'm not just going into it because I'm interested and want to know more. I'm interested and I want to be able to tell this story. I want to be able to convey this to readers in such a way that they're going to feel like they're beside me. They're going to, really, I don't know, feel like they're inside the story. And I think that, again, that's something where if you kind of have it in mind the whole time, you're going to be reporting differently, asking different questions, sort of absorbing different details. And so you're just always thinking about the whole picture, not just tell me what happened, but, how did it make you feel? Like, do you remember what you were wearing, where you were standing? Like, I don't know, just, really kind of trying to get people, to get sources, subjects to almost relive. And so I think that, and then I think the best of the best are very open to collaboration, meaning journalism is not a solo project, as much as I think some folks would like it to be sometimes. I think they have all the answers. I think the best of the best recognize that telling the best version of a story, involves letting other cooks into the kitchen, not too many, obviously, but, being willing to respect when either an editor or a reader, an early reader meaning, or a fact checker or somebody, points out not just you got something wrong, or, I think you might want to talk to this person or whatever, but also just, but have you thought about this? Have you thought about this approach to the story? And just being really willing to hear that out and incorporate that kind of collaboration into their work. I'm sure there are other things, but those are what immediately jump to mind.
Especially with respect to the empathy component, can that be taught?
Oh man, what a good question. I don't know. Wow. I don't know. like the sort of cynic in me says no, because I think, like, some people are better journalists because they are just people who come with sort of that instinct, that gene, like whatever you want to call it. That being said, I think you get better at it. Like, I think I've definitely gotten better. I mean, I'm still improving, like, as I go, as a reporter, like, I think going into something without learning to go into situations without expectations, meeting sources where they are, emotionally. This is actually something that Rana and I talked about in our presentation at the Power of Narrative conference, about how, particularly when you're dealing with vulnerable or traumatized subjects, you kind of have to meet them wherever they are. And that might be way over, I'm pointing to the left one day, and then, like, way over, I'm pointing to the right another day. That is an exercise in empathy, right? Not expecting somebody to be in the same place every time or to be on your terms. And I do think that that's something that you can develop an instinct for and get better at, about being less prescriptive, being less, I don't know, seeking to control, situations. And I think in terms of can we teach that to people? I mean, I think you can teach it insofar as you can show by example, and you can also, I mean, more or less that was what Rana's and our presentation was about, was trying to give people takeaways that I think ultimately all really shared an interest in empathy. So I'm trying to remember, I think our first takeaway, it was, absorb risk, meaning, understand that maybe a story is not going to go the way that you expect it to, establish trust, keep it, don't hide or hide from complications. Sometimes complications are part of the story. Sometimes they're the whole story. And so anyway, I think that there are ways in which we can, I don't know that we can teach other people to be good people. That's not really what I'm saying, but I think you can sort of offer insights and advice about approaching this work more empathically.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And I think we can segue into Stephen's story here, which is kind of this kind of cool anti-war, rage against the machine kind of story. It feels of the moment too, given that we're in this nonsensical war that's likely going to turn into some maddening quagmire. And so in any case, Stephen pitches you the story. What did it look like across your desk, and what was it that was like, this is a good one?
Stephen's just a really good writer. So I'll say that, like, his pitch was very just like well articulated. It was very vibrant insofar as he, it's this whole sort of cast of characters, all these young friends who were resisting the Vietnam War. And, we've all heard stories about people resisting the Vietnam War in one way or another, movies about it. But this just felt like he had insight and access into this one particular group. And I think, all of them are alive, except I think maybe 2, maybe 3 people. But he had already just done these incredible interviews. Very clearly, he has a podcast background. He's very good at interviewing. And it just felt like, these people are going to pop off the page, and their relationships with each other are really going to sing in the story. So I think it was definitely that. And then to your point, I think that there is a contemporary relevance. We assigned this before the Iran situation, quagmire such as it is, whatever, started. But, we were still, looking at a highly militant government, and a government arguably waging war on its own people, on the streets. And, building up this paramilitary force against people who disagree with them, and also immigrants in this country. And so I think there was also this, without it being, very, very obvious, it was like the story is a reminder of the ways in which you can resist and non-violently resist. I absolutely love the end of this piece when you kind of get to know where everybody is now. And, you've got, I think it's Mike Hickey, who is like, he happens to live near where I live, and he's like still involved, like actively involved with like the peace movement and a movement to put an arms embargo on shipments to Israel out of like the Oakland port here. And like, it was just, I mean, I said this on social media yesterday when we published the story. This story reminded me to have a little faith in other people, which can be really hard lately. And I think that the combination of sort of Stephen's vision for the story, his access, some of the sort of amazing details about like how they pulled off these actions against draft boards. And then on top of that, that feeling of like, man, we need to be reminded of these kinds of stories, of resistance and solidarity. Yeah. And it's not unusual, but like we, in this piece, because his interviews were so strong, we actually pulled out some clips of the activists talking, and you can like click on them in the story to hear them sort of elaborate on some stuff. Yeah. And they were just good interviews like that. There's that one Sally Hanlon when she talks about how she, as a little girl, like they're all Catholic, right? They're very, very Catholic, and part of the Catholic left in the 60s and 70s. And she's like, I really desperately wanted the stigmata as a child. And she would be like, Mom, why don't I have the stigmata yet? And her mom would be like, keep praying, like these incredible little like anecdotes. I think they were just good interviewers. They were good storytellers, which, is also Stephen, like I said, being a very good interviewer. Or the fact that, the raid that they tried to pull off in Buffalo involved, among other things, crochet needles, fondue forks, an inflatable kiddie pool, fabric dye, and then also they did it in their underwear. Like, it's just, the whole thing is just kind of outrageous, but at the same time so righteous. And so I think just all those ingredients made it exciting for us.
And it's always great getting your side of the table in terms of the unique challenges to this piece, be it structurally or however you saw fit to bring the best possible version of the story to light. So what were some challenges that you encountered?
Yeah, I think in this case, it was very much, again, Stephen's a very good writer. He had a very good sense of what the structure was going to be. He obviously knew his characters. And I think that in this case, it was really winnowing down, because there were just so many little details. There were so many quotes, so many interesting things that these people had said. And I mean, I would have to go back and look, but if I recall correctly, the main edit that I did was really just, first of all, it didn't take that long. It was actually a pretty quick turnaround. Like, he filed it and I was done with it 2 days later, more or less. And it was because it was just like, okay, here we have Jim Good saying 3 things. They're all really interesting, but like, we don't actually need all 3 of them, because we're like, how do we keep the story moving? And so we got to pick, like, what do we think is like the best quote here that Jim uses? And so it was really, figuring out how to kind of winnow things. And one of the things we talked about was, are there a couple of moments where we should pull out an audio clip? So like one of the examples, Chuck Darst in the story, when he was being interrogated, said that an FBI agent like dangled him out a window and he, refused to give his name or give anything up. And when the guy pulled him back in the window, they ended up having this, I guess, kind of profound conversation about just war theory and about nonviolence. And it was one of those things, was like, that's really interesting, but actually kind of hard to, it slowed down the action of the story. And it was like, well, let's just have Chuck say that in an audio clip, and you can hear him say it if people feel like it. But, we're not getting bogged down in like an extra 100 words, where, again, interesting thing, but also the kind of thing you don't just want to say, he pulled him back in the window and they had a conversation about just war. Like, that doesn't, like, that's not enough. But then going on longer and longer would kind of start to feel a little shaggy, a little loose from a narrative standpoint. So I would say that was like the number one thing. But it was also very easy, and Stephen was really easy to work with, and totally was like, basically, I want an editor to do this. Like, I wanted somebody to go through and sort of prune this story.
Nice. Well, it's always a pleasure getting to talk to you about these kind of things and, delve into, what makes particular Atavist writers like so good at what they do. And so in any case, it's just great to talk to you, Sayward. And now we're going to kick it over to Stephen now and hear what he has to say.
Thank you so much, Brendan.
Nice. Didn't Sayward great? She set the table up nicely for Stephen Wood, who can be found at sbrycewood2.wixsite.com, or just go to his preference, which is LinkedIn. It's like, hey, it's Steven. You'll find him. It's Steven with a PH. Okay, all right. Okay. His work has appeared in The Guardian, Current Affairs, The Jacobin, The Athletic, and McSweeney's. Those last two are kind of like gold publications for me. He was a producer with Gilded Audio, where he worked on shows including Snafu with Ed Helms and The Reason We're All Still Here. In this chat, we talk about calibrating an interview. That's actually a pretty cool moment. What to do when there's too much meat on the bone. Hashtag too much meat. I just threw that one in there. What's a load-bearing element to the story, how to interrogate for it, going in fear of the abstraction, and a lot more. We also talked for 10 minutes about sports writing, but I cut it out because it was kind of weighing down the thrust of the podcast. But I plan on sharing that audio on the Patreon page, so visit patreon.com/CNFpod for those DVD extras. Why don't we get after it, CNFers? Cue up the riff. Huh. I always love getting a sense of what actual like professional producers do. I know what I do on this side of the thing, which is everything. But for you, like, what was the nature of producing shows?
I find it really fun, and it's like producer to produce, like very vague terms that I really had no idea, like watching or listening to credits, like what that was until I started to work in an industry where, you know, I actually met and worked as one. But yeah, I mean, I would say like my job, it was pretty full service, which was just very fun. Cause I mean, everything from figuring out topics for shows and like mapping out entire seasons worth of narratives, to doing tons of interviews. Like usually I'd say, I feel like it's probably been at 50-50 in my career, like doing prep for interviews that someone else is going to do versus doing them yourself. And like, you know, a lot of times when you're listening to an interview on a podcast, it was actually a producer doing that interview, you know. I'm always amazed by like how well some people are able to like stitch it together to make it sound like the host was the one doing it.
Oh my God. See, I didn't know that either. So does like on the back end, does the actual host come in and kind of track in a question even though like they didn't physically ask it to the person?
Yeah. And what I've been told is that happens in news, like radio quite a bit, which I don't have any experience in news, like hard news, but yeah, that's a thing. And also like a trick that we would use was, well, you do like an in-depth interview, like a producer does an in-depth interview first, and you get a ton of tape from that and you get the person's story. And then you do like a half hour where like the actual host or whoever talks to them. And so like, you have tape of them talking to use to make it clear that they talked, and nobody has to know that there was an extra hour or whatever. But yeah, I mean, and it's like, in addition to that, like, I mean, it depends on the show. Obviously some things are just like talk format. There might not be as heavily edited, but I've worked mostly on stuff that's scripted and edited. So like, yeah, for Snafu, which is the show that this article kind of grew out of, we did a lot of rounds of scripting. You do a lot of rounds of scripting before it gets into audio. And then like, you might, I've stood in for host before, just like on the first version, like just to hear it, you know, a lot of tracking with hosts and a lot of piecing stuff together. I had to learn Pro Tools on the job, which was scary, but also it feels very empowering once you actually learn how to like, you know, manipulate audio like that. So yeah. And even, yeah, like we had input on like the titles of shows, titles of episodes, like the art that went along with it. Yeah, and you know, obviously different producer roles, like you might just be doing kind of a sliver of that. But I was really lucky, I think, to have like a depth of experience in all that stuff. Yeah, it's cool. It's like it feels very hands-on. Yeah.
Well, in paramount to doing, be it narrative audio or narrative writing, is this interviewing, of course, but then there's like a pre-interviewing component also, and usually that pre-interviewing can come in with written stuff, be like, okay, let's let's have a little like speed dating thing, and we'll get into greater depths later. It's like you might be getting good information, but it's like, okay, hold off a little bit. So like for you, be it in your audio experience or doing something longer like you did with the Atavist, like what is your your pre-interviewing experience like with sources?
Yeah, I've done a lot of that, and in situations where I was going on to do an interview and not. But yeah, I think for like the people in this article, for example, there's an element of like winning people's trust over, and I think just like getting them to open up. I think that's very important. Is just like anything you can do to make it easier to have a conversation will make the actual substance of the interview easier. It's very important because people are not. What I realized, I think, is that the people are not necessarily like. It's important for the guests too to be pre-interviewed, and people are not going to come knowing exactly what you'll find most interesting or like what the most pertinent or like juiciest part of what they're going to say is. So it's very important to keep your ears open for that. Yeah, but I do think of it kind of as just like trying to get a sense of like the scope of like what can be talked about. I mean, like again, like for this, I just had to like start by asking people, how many government buildings did you break into? Do you remember? And we'll get into the details of why later. But yeah, I guess like scope and just kind of just loosening people up, I think are very important.
Yeah, for sure. And in that kind of pre-interviewee kind of stage is especially as a freelancer, it's kind of talking to them and sort of that source pitching is hard because you're like, hey, I'm really attracted to your story. I'd like to get some information. I want to pitch this to maybe A, B, and C. I don't know if they're going to take it, but I still want to like some of your time, but I don't want to monopolize your time because this thing might not get picked up. Those are real conversations you have to have with sources. Like, I hope it gets picked up, but I can't guarantee it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I was to be clear, it was easier than usual, honestly, with this piece, with this Atavist piece, because I'd already been in contact with Ken Muty, who's one of the characters, and he was very eager to talk and very helpful about like getting other people on board. So like, I think a lot of the initial hesitation that you would expect or just people being like, what is this, was assuaged because it was like their friend Ken coming to them and being like, you should be involved in this.
Yeah. So how did you arrive at this story?
It feels like a really long journey. So
that's so true with so many Atavist stories. So many people can be working on these things for like 10 years, but not consecutively, but like the germ of the idea comes a long time ago and it takes a long time to coalesce, but when it does, it's like, it's magic. But yeah. Can keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. And actually, yeah, I mean, based on like other stories I've read in the Atavist, this might be one of the shorter like lengths. It took me like, I wasn't writing it for, I don't know how long it was, a couple of months, but yeah, so in my former job as a podcast producer, I worked on a couple of seasons of the show called Snafu with Ed Helms. Season 2 was the one that I was most like deeply involved in, and it was just very it's one of my favorite things that I've worked on. It was extremely in my wheelhouse. It was about this in March of 1971, so a couple of months before the events of the story that I wrote. This group of really just ordinary citizens concerned about the war, people who'd been protesting and come to suspect that the FBI was spying on them, planned this just, it was all kind of simple, but it was just a very meticulously planned burglary of an FBI. You can call it a field office. It doesn't even really rise to the level of field office, but they broke in to this building where they suspected there might be compromising files, explaining like FBI malfeasance, and they found just more than anyone could have possibly predicted. And like, I think very few people seem to really know about the media burglary, but I think a lot of people know about what came out of it. It was the first time that COINTELPRO had been publicly exposed. A lot of like, it was really one of the major factors in the church hearings being convened. And it, one of the first things they discovered was that every Black student at Swarthmore College outside of Philly was under surveillance by the FBI, that was basically happening all over the country. Just, massive infiltration of the Black Panthers, of like every leftist organization you could think of. The government was actively trying to break up. They they stole all these files because Hoover had such a like rigid system of like CCing everyone. They basically got like, they were able to tell that this was happening all over the country just by burglarizing this one office. They got away clean. It's incredible. They got away clean and didn't publicly surface until I think 2014 was when they started to. And the last person to come forward didn't do it until they did it on our show in I think 2024. Yeah, and so like it was this really important anti-war action or it grew out of anti-war stuff. I mean, it became, I guess, chiefly about like FBI surveillance, but it grew out of war resistance. And these people had these burglary skills, essentially, and kind of they knew they could do it, and they understood the basics of how to put the plan together because most of them had experience raiding draft boards. And I just never heard of that. And like, even as I was researching quite in depth this one robbery, the media Pennsylvania burglary, it was still hard for me to find information about draft board raids. And like all of our sources, nearly all of them had participated and they talked about it a little bit, but it was just this real sense of like, I'm just seeing the tip of the iceberg. Tip of the Medberg was the pun that we used because that was the name of the FBI's investigation into the media burglary. But they did not have creative. And then the show came out and we were working on season 3. But I remember like very clearly meeting with my colleague and friend Betty Metzger, who she was the journalist who published these files once they were burgled. And I think a very important detail about that story is that they were sent to multiple reporters and multiple Congress people. Everyone sent them straight to the DOJ except for Betty and the Washington Post, who published it, which like, it's just wild. They went to all that trouble and it might not have even come out if not for her and the Post's courage in publishing it. But so she's been covering this movement since she was in her like 20s. And we both had the sense that there just wasn't really enough about it. It was like a missing part of American anti-war history. And that was December of 24. So like, everyone's just massively depressed and waiting for the new Trump administration. And I think we just had a sense of like, this would be a worthwhile thing for us to look into. And so she just kind of serendipitously had been in touch with Bob Good, who he shows up in my story, another collaborator and friend of mine, who was part of the media. Bob was part of the Camden 28, the busted raid in Camden. And he, I guess they had gotten in touch with Ken and the Buffalo people. So Betty and Bob and Ken and I just said, hey, let's start recording these stories. Like, these are really cool oral histories. And, I had an eye towards eventually making something out of it, but wanted to just get the interviews done and find out what we had. And thankfully, because we were working with Ken and he was very enthusiastic, basically the first group of people I talked to outside of the media and Camden people were the characters in the Atavist story, the Buffalo folks.
As I was reading the piece, there was a very like Ocean's 11 kind of feel to it, especially the way you kind of sketch out, some of the main characters. There'll be like a graph about them, and it's like a little micro biography. This is who they are. It's like bang, 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 and then even in the sort of epilogue of the thing, it's like here they are now. It's like bang, bang, bang. It reminds me of that scene at the end of the recent Ocean's 11. They're all sitting at the fountain and they all get up one by one. It kind of had that vibe to it for me as a reader.
You don't know what that means to me. That's my favorite movie. Like, since I was a kid, I love heists, and that just stylistically, dialogue, the characterization in that, I love it. So thank you. That's like the nicest thing you could have said.
Well, it's speaking of style and voice, like, I love, like, right in the first paragraph, like the last sentence is like, consider yourself advised. Right off the bat, this is a story about Catholics. And I highlighted that mainly because, like, that's just such a great demonstrative sentence that's going to show you that there is a degree of whimsy to this, to the approach to this, to the writing, and the story is going to be kind of wacky. Give me a sense of how you think about, voice and style and what you bring to a particular story if a certain voice and style is invited by the material.
I do kind of feel like this fell into my lap because it's serious in the sense that it's about war. It's about they're trying to stop just the most horrific things you can imagine from happening, and they knew it was happening, and it's all happening in the background, but they got real goofy with it. And like I it's very hard. People who know me would tell, it's very hard for me to tell a story straight or without trying to make people laugh, regardless of how serious the subject matter is. So I think these people and their personalities and their approach back in 1971 fed very nicely into my approach as I was writing it. I mean, they were terrified, and they went through a lot of stuff that we would probably say is traumatic. Some really bad things happened to them over the course of it, but like it was clear to me from the way they talk about it and the tone with which they reflect on it that they were having fun at the time. So I felt like, I wanted to be clear that it was kind of like I don't know, it was like a group project or something, in addition to being like a federal crime. Yeah. And I wanted that to come through, and I wanted it to feel like, I wanted people to be able to picture themselves as like a part of the group. And rather than what, but I wanted people to be able to feel like I could have been in the living room talking about this break-in with them. Like I can imagine myself, staking it out and freaking out, or just like, yeah. So I think that's what I was shooting for.
Well, and there's a pretty big cast of characters too, and that can be hard to keep everything straight, in a 8,000 or 9,000 word piece, or I think this might be around 11,000 actually. Yeah. Even still, that's for the amount of characters, that is pretty lean, and you've got a very propulsive story. So when you are dealing with a lot of characters, a big cast, how do you keep it straight and organized in your materials so you can write without confusing yourself, and by extension confusing the reader?
I should caveat it by saying maybe I didn't keep it entirely straight. Every time, not every time, but there were a number of fact check things where it was something that I just thought I knew so cold that I hadn't checked it myself before writing it. And then it was like, this was actually said by, a different person. The interviews like run together in my mind. But again, I guess I think I have a habit coming from podcasting of trying to start with tape. So like, we use this program, Descript or Descript. And I just have all my transcripts in there already. Like before I started writing it all, I went through and did, like, we would call it pulling selects in podcasting, just highlighting good bits. So I think I realized very early that, yeah, there's just like a ton of characters. And I mean, there are people who had a lot to do with the story who we basically had to cut out of it, who I did interview. I mean, sort of. And there are more people who I wasn't able to interview who should have featured prominently, if we'd been able to talk to them. So yeah, I mean, I wanted to make sure that it felt propulsive and that we were never like lingering on one character too much. And I kind of just felt like I want each of them to get a couple of good lines in, like, rather than making sure, and Sayward might laugh at this because I'm sure I had big biographies of a lot of people that got cut down like a lot. But yeah, I just kind of figured like, I want to see to it that the main characters all get their chance to shine, but that it not, we don't have to follow each and every one of them through every plot point. So yeah, I think, yeah, just like referring back frequently to the tape and like trying to pick out the good bits. And I think like trying to let those do the characterization for me was, yeah.
Yeah. And always the challenge in an Atavist story in particular is, narrative drive, beginning, middle, and ends. They're very unique in how they compose the stories and the stories they accept. And that degree of reporting ahead of time before you can even feel comfortable pitching is often challenging for writers and reporters to see. So when did you know you had enough sort of narrative meat on the bone to really lean full in, 100% to pursue the story to its fullest extent?
I almost feel like the problem was that there was too much. There's a number of raids. Like I've interviewed people who took part in a number of different raids. And this was kind of just the one that was like the most obviously telegenic, like that, and already shaped like a long form story or a movie plot, kind of, because I think just having the raid get busted and having the threat of like going to prison hanging over so many of the characters, and then just naturally, just because that's how it unfolded, there's this middle section where they do more burglaries, and then going into the trial. I mean, I think the struggle for me was more trying to make sure that we're keeping beginning, middle, and end like that, because there's so many directions that I could have gone off in. Like, I easily could have included a lot more about Camden, which I think would have made things very confusing for the reader. Yeah, I was looking at a lot of different raids, and I knew I wanted to write about them, and I was trying to find something that I thought could fit easily into a piece like this without having to do like so much explaining of something else. And I mean, there's a good bit of context about the draft board raid movement in there, but I think to write about a lot of them, it might have been like you have to do more of that kind of scene, more of that scene setting, and there might be actually less material to work with. Whereas with this, there were, they did 4 of these actions and had a 2-week long trial. Yeah, I feel like as it went on, I was just like, could they have done one less? Like it might just fit a little bit nicer. It felt to me like there was just a lot there the whole time.
Yeah. So how are you thinking about the structure of the piece once you have enough of the material to run with and really start composing?
I did have like a perverse urge to try to mess with the timeline, and I'm really glad that I didn't follow that. Maybe it's like I wanted there to be like, I don't know, a cold open or, but luckily it proceeds pretty much chronologically, and the events worked out nicely. The history worked out nicely. In terms of like starting to construct it again, I don't think I literally did this where I literally like copied and pasted all the quotes together, but in my head I was just kind of trying to stack like moments and tape that I knew had to go in, that I knew would be good. I did I think this must have been like 5th grade. I had to do this project where we had to write an essay. Mine was about the Kennedy assassination, but we had to do it entirely with other people's quotes, so just like firsthand quotes and then like secondary sources. And it was I think it was meant to teach us about research, but I really like that approach because I'm very loquacious. I will happily just sit down and write like 1,000 words before I know what I'm talking about. So not doing that and trying to start with the tape and then think like, what do I need to fill in? I try to maintain that approach in order to just, to stop myself from going off the rails. So I guess the tricky part was like, how do I introduce the fact that there is this whole network of raiders and this whole constellation of raids happening, because it's not like you can just say, this guy came up with the idea and then he went to Buffalo and planned it. Like it was nothing like that. So like figuring out where to put that context in, figuring out how much was necessary. But I think that like I knew we had great tape like about the burglary itself and getting busted. I knew that the court scene, like the court scenes, there's the Spartacus moment that like just naturally has to be a big moment. I was actually surprised the structure didn't change more. The first section, as it is going to appear in the article, was the first section to begin with, which I feel like is actually kind of rare for me. I feel like I usually end up doing something, trying to get too cute with it or something, or that's what I did the first time, and then we have to simplify it. But yeah,
I think that's rare for Jonah and Sayward too. Usually they find like a very charismatic lead that really hooks you, and then you start kind of backfilling, and usually chronologically from there. But usually there's something kind of like that, like in a Marvel movie, how it just starts out like boom, out the gate, big set piece, and then we kind of sink more into the story and gives that opening its context and everything.
Yeah, I think I have a natural inclination to want to do a cold open on everything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was kind of refreshing to go back and like read drafts of this and be like, oh wow, this is in chronological order. Isn't that simple?
Yeah. Well, yeah, writing stories that are this long and this ambitious have a lot in common with book writing too, and I'm sure like very long narrative podcasts too, where you really have to be organized about how you're plotting these things out and maybe having a good system in place, be it for your quotes and all your archival material and stuff of that nature. What's the system that you like to employ for, kind of as a central nervous system for a piece of this nature?
I guess I think a lot about it's just like the simple metaphor of like, stories that are like a plane ride from point A to point B versus like episodic, like a train, and just trying to keep in mind, like kind of imagining being above it, like looking at everything proceeding and like, is this clear? Is it actually going linearly? In some, according to whatever you've decided.
How do you tend to organize your, even just getting maybe a little granular here, and then maybe you can telescope it out from there, but just like your tape and quotes, like do you organize that by character or maybe by like sort of a chapter, if you will, like even if those characters appear across multiple places, or you just have like a dossier with Bob's quotes, and then you kind of be like, okay, this will go somewhere. Or, yeah,
I do have that. I mean, I do I keep the transcripts and the selects, and but yeah, it's also like something that I will do is put in way too much and then cut most of it, and or someone else will cut most of it. But yeah, and that like, stacking up, like if I have a couple of good quotes about the same thing, my first draft might have all of them in there, and then I know that they're all going to go away. Most of them are going to go away. Yeah, it's kind of like giving yourself different options. And yeah, and that it is helpful to keep that chronological. I wish I could say that I actually did that throughout the piece, but as we went along editing, in places where things need to be swapped out, or something had gone away and now we need a new thing, like, yeah, having done just a little bit of thinking and organization there, it's like, okay, I know what to pull from, or at least I know roughly like where in the tape to look. This isn't an actual example, but just, if there's something that Chuck said got cut and now this section doesn't make sense, like I know there's a Mo quote that I can pull from to kind of gloss over it or something like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a tag team wrestling. It's
Yeah.
like, all right, you're out. Yeah, you got to go in now.
I had that feeling. Yeah, and it's hard not to feel personal about it, because I can get really invested in a specific turn of phrase or tone of voice that someone uses, and it's a bummer to have to take out a quote to kill one of your darlings, as it were. But yeah, yeah, you're tagging somebody else in.
Yeah, and over the course of the writing and composing and generating of the piece, there's any number of times along that timeline where you're going to encounter a certain measure of doubt about whether you're able to stick the landing, whether you're good enough to do it. Like, why did they even accept this? Like, I'm a piece of shit. Like,
Yeah.
all that stuff. Like, how do you wrestle with those feelings, Stephen? I do it all the time. I have to wrestle with it all the time, and I always love pulling on that thread with people who join me on the microphones here.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think, because I did kind of struggle with how to land this. I mean, I knew that there would probably just have to be some, like you're saying, that the fountain scene, like there'd have to be like some wrapping up of all these people's stories. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, I honestly, I think the way that I dealt with it in that specific case is just I didn't have any kind of satisfactory conclusion on my first draft, and having sent it to the editor that way helped us both get to one, I guess.
Ending TK.
Pretty much. I don't think I literally had those letters in there, but that was the vibe. It kind of I think my original draft was close to it was probably like 18,000 words, and it just like ended. So maybe another way of putting that would be like being comfortable with it not being complete. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, in terms of how to deal with that kind of like doubt or just like frustration of like where to go. I mean, it's probably a boring answer, but like just rewriting it a million times. Like I definitely have a sense of what's satisfactory to me and what's not. And even if I don't know why something is unsatisfactory, I will rewrite the same sentence or paragraph for an hour until I can look at it and be like, okay, whatever was bothering me about this before is no longer here. I've managed to like chisel out something that I'm happy with. I think it's just like I think of it like sculpting a lot, like in that I'm not a sculptor, so it probably doesn't make any sense, but but I just think of like chipping away at like what I wrote to get to like what I meant to write.
Early in your piece, I love the sentence you wrote for it kind of has a, not that there's nutcraft, but it's got kind of like a little vibe for that, and I really love this. It's what separated these raids from nearly all other anti-war actions was, to put it bluntly, their potential to be effective. In a world without computers, the physical documents containing the personal information of draft-eligible men might have been the only materials linking those men to the Selective Service Administration. And a quote from Jim Good, I often thought, what about the women who worked in these offices? Did they see those files as death certificates? And it's like, wow, like, that must have lit you. When we talk about good tape, like that's great tape right there. That must have lit you up when you were having that conversation. Yeah,
I do remember. I think that quote was not in my first draft, and I remember a moment where I remembered it, and I was like, "Oh, that has to go there." Yeah, and you think about what it was like, for someone like Chuck to hold for anyone to hold a draft card in their hand and think about what that meant. Jim had a couple of absolute bangers of lines that were always destined to go in the article, but yeah, I mean the way that they thought about and talked about government property and files is very interesting to me. They basically, as a movement, had collectively decided that some property does not have a right to exist, and that it was, you know, their rights as citizens basically to go in and check it out and get it and destroy it if they wanted to. Which is a real, I mean, I think that's kind of the making that leap, and then the subsequent leap to decide to do something about it is that's the journey that like they all went on. For that to make sense, it's very crucial to really like think about, just the material and like and the raw practicality thing also that does separate it for me. Like I've always been interested in this period of time. I've always been interested in anti-war activity. It was like, you know, there's a lot about this that a lot of related topics that I think are cool. But yeah, I just, every time I compared this to other things that were happening around the same time, or even to other actions since then, there's just something really raw, physical practicality about it.
Yeah, some people bristle at process, but I always love getting a sense of how individual writers go about the work, how they structure their day around a particular project. If they have multiple projects or a day job, like how are you getting these things, how are you threading in the time to report out a piece of this nature amidst other things and juggling all other things. So, you know, for maybe this one in particular or just broadly, you know, what is the process by which you warm up the engine and, you know, have a good session with your material?
I feel like I kind of was working on this all over the place and at many different times a day. I like right now I'm working part-time in addition to journalism part-time. So I didn't have mornings for like, I guess most of the time that this was like in edits. I just, I would come into the home office where I am in the afternoon. I don't know. I mean, ideally I'm sitting in the Brooklyn Botanic Garden all day. Just writing and listening to a couple of albums on repeat. I remember when my mom showed me this article about how listening to music while you worked was bad for you in like high school or college. And I had apologies. That's how I do it. Like it really helps me, I think, to feel like I'm in some kind of rhythm. And I feel like I spend hours of a day in headphones with stuff playing. I like to start to feel like I have a rhythm to writing. And I think if I have that, I can probably do it under most circumstances. Coffee is absolutely vital. Otherwise, like, it's occasionally it'll be great to have like an actual day where I'm just like, I might go out to like a cafe somewhere, or I might just like sit in my armchair in the other room, or if it's nice, I'll go to a park or the garden or something and try to like, you know, work in calm and like stimulating surroundings. But a lot of times I think I might have actually written the lead to this on my phone on the subway or something early. I remember doing that with. So I
love hearing that, because, you know, not a lot of people have the benefit or the privilege to have like a very set time every single day. It's like, here's this thing I've got and I got to thread it around other responsibilities. And the fact that you wrote the lead on your phone, maybe on the subway, you know, like that's like you've had a cocoon of time and a bit of inspiration, maybe in an unideal place, but this was a time to get something down while you were inspired to do it.
Cocoon is a good way of thinking of it. Yeah. And I as I was finishing this piece, my partner is finishing her dissertation. So sometimes we were in the same office. Sometimes I let her have the office. It's like, okay, you know, this has taken me like 6 months, taken you like 6 years. So you get precedent. But we were some moving around, a lot of moving pieces. But I think I like the thought of a cocoon. I think once I can get myself in there, like no matter where I am, I can focus on what I'm writing.
Yeah, sometimes like the context of putting the headphones on, or maybe even just like noise canceling earmuffs, and it just creates a condition where you're like, okay, you know, I might only have 30 minutes today, but this is what I'm going to do for 30 minutes and block everything else out and listen to. Yeah, I'm a big fan of movie soundtracks for that very reason.
Yeah.
When I was writing my last book, I was The Batman soundtrack was big. Arrival.
Oh, nice.
The Queen's Gambit soundtrack.
Oh, that was a good
I
one.
liked a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was really great. And some Legends of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom.
Nice.
The
Nice.
score for that video game was integral, and a couple other ones too. I think Dark Knight Rises soundtrack and The Dark Knight, like those two, like those kind of things that can be a bit brooding.
Yeah.
Always help me. I love a good brood.
Yeah, those are good choices, and yeah, soundtracks make sense. I've realized that I'm very I pretty much can't help but like thinking about the lyrics of whatever I'm listening to, and if I don't know the lyrics, I have to like look them up. So I can't really listen to new music while I'm writing because I'm just going to be that's all I'm going to be thinking about. But stuff that I know really well that like just washes over me, or stuff in other languages that I can't understand,
Yeah.
are things that are good for that.
What might you identify as something that like you're better at today, having been in this for a while, than you were like 5 or 10 years ago? Maybe something you struggled with a lot 5 or 10 years ago that you feel like you're like, oh yeah, I'm pretty good at this now, and maybe I'm more efficient at this now.
I don't know. You would think that I would have gotten more efficient over, say, a decade. I don't know that I have. I mean, the first thing that came to mind was asking questions.
Right.
If that counts as part of the writing process.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's integral to everything we do. Like, we got to interview well, and ideally you take like the John Sawartzky method of interviewing, where you like lean, open, neutral questions, like not being overly verbose, not answering the question for your source, getting just being as economical as possible. And then usually those short, punchy questions lead to very long answers. Like, you just lay it out there real quick shot clock, as I like to say, and then let them go.
Yeah. And I think the art of I think of it as like, I'm always calibrating when I'm interviewing somebody. Yeah. Like how much of a prompt are they going to need? And what is going to get something out of them. And yeah, I had a job where basically all I did was oral histories with people, not all of whom really wanted to do it. So like that, I think, was a very good practice. I met a very wide range of people with a very wide range of like, you know, how enthusiastic or talkative they were. And I think that helped me just figure out a variety of ways to get stuff out of people. But also, to answer that question, I mean, yeah, kind of boring, but structure. I heard you talk about this on a recent podcast, so I don't want to just revisit it entirely. But Sid Field's, you know, screenwriting book, I've read a couple of times. I think that's getting that name right. Being able to think about things like that and like be very intentional about your structure. I always was intentional about structure, but I think thinking of it less through the lens of like, how do you like organize an argument or whatever, organize an essay, and more of like, you know, you need to grab your audience in the first 10 minutes, or maybe that's the first page or something in writing, or, you know, like the pinches have to come here and here. Like, you must do this work of characterizing. Like, yeah, learning some steps and actually following them.
Yeah, there's and also like when you're interviewing someone, it's like, are they the kind of to your point of kind of feeling them out? Like, are they the kind of person who might respond better if you share a little personal anecdote too? Like, some people don't do that at all, or some people overdo it. But then maybe you can feel like you can soften them a little bit. Or if you're like a former athlete, maybe you can kind of relate to if you're trying to get stuff out of an athlete. It'd be like, yeah, I was never as competitive as you. I never got as far as you, but I kind of understand the rigor through which you do this, and you can kind of relate. And at that point, like, oh, they're kind of speaking my language a little bit. And sometimes that can soften them, and you can get some good stuff there. Other times it's just like, yeah, like ask your question in 5 to 10 seconds and get out of the way.
Yeah, right. Some people you'll be like, you know, did you grow up in a house or an apartment? And then they'll just take you on like a 20-minute tour of like their early life. Yeah. And like other people, you'd be like, you know, like, can you, you know, like what's, you know, something important to know about your mother? And they'll just be like, oh, I don't know, she was nice. Like, you know, it's a personality thing. And I'm interviewing athletes. I think that is a really good experience for someone well, not good, but a valuable experience for someone who really is trying to get better at interviewing, because like athletes are trained to stonewall you, and even if they're not, they just kind of like, somebody could do like just make the most incredible shot, like break a record, whatever. And my friends and I joke about this all the time, how every single athlete interview is just like, yeah, we wanted to win. Plan was to win. We went out there, and I think we really executed. And so it was great to win for the team. Trying to get them to say anything interesting is like always an uphill battle, and probably helpful in the long run if you want to like get good at asking questions, because you really need to figure out something to ask.
I always love getting a sense of just unique challenges that you faced, be it through the reporting or the writing, little hurdles that places where you got stumped and you're like, this is a bit of a challenge. How you work through it, maybe how you had a dialogue with Sayward to like break you through a certain element. So just what was maybe a challenge or two to this piece that was maybe a sticking point that you wrestled with?
Yeah, I think one thing that I perennially have to deal with is just there's, like I said, it was kind of like there was too much meat on it. Like there was just so much, and I didn't even I mean, there's this whole side quest. Several of them, Mo Considine told me about this. Like several of them were invited to Attica Penitentiary by the prisoners there to be on the committee that was supposed to be bargaining with the state. So there's this whole that happened, like, I guess after the string of burglaries, but before the trial. I don't know if I have the dates right, but letting go of stuff like that and just being like, okay, like this is really cool, but not central. It's not load bearing, you can take it out. That's kind of just how editing goes. But there was just so much to cover here. And I really wanted people to have a sense of the time period that they were in and what else was like happening. Because just so much was going on in that period. And I think a lot of that probably ended up having to get cut just because we had to tell a story, not just like a pastiche of what was going on. But another thing is memory. And I was thinking about this yesterday. I do feel like I was pretty lucky. Not that people had total recall. They didn't, but I think they were all pretty straightforward with me about their limitations on that. And that can be tricky because, you don't ever want to be caught out not remembering anything like on the record. It's just embarrassing. And especially like if you're in your 70s or 80s, I have to assume, you don't want to be like, you don't want people to think that you're just like the recall isn't there. But I think that everyone was very just straightforward with me about that. And so I knew it gave me confidence that the stuff they remembered, that they actually remembered. And like, I mean, Jim, cause I feel like he said this a couple of times and would be comfortable with me saying like, he couldn't remember, he could not remember how many offices he'd broken into overall, like, or where they all were necessarily, which does pose a challenge because I'm trying to write about it. But there were some details that he just remembered like clear as day. Focusing on that and kind of, I don't think we ran into any real like factual like log jams, but I did with Emily, the fact checker, and I had to kind of mentally reconstruct the building that the original burglary took place in, because that was something where like I probably every one of the 5 people I interviewed had a slightly different telling of like where they were, what was on what floor. And I don't even know if that's possible. I don't know if it's possible to go back and find a floor plan of this building from 1971 and to figure, so we had to basically just do this. It was like a logic problem where we were just like, okay, well, we know they escaped on the bottom level. We know they jumped down at least one flight from there. Like, eventually I think we came to the right conclusion, but it was like cross-referencing like 4 different people's accounts and having to hold in your head that, I trust them on this detail. It sounds like they're getting it right, or it's backed up by what other people said, or, maybe it was the 3rd floor, not the 5th or whatever it was. We did have to do a little bit of, just like actually like mentally piecing together the building itself. And I guess also like the trial, I wrote about the Camden 28 trial for Snafu, and trials are inherently dramatic, but they're not written like dramas. So I think it's always a bit of a challenge to tell the story of a trial in a compelling way that makes it clear like what happened in what order while actually pulling out the important moments and not falling into the trap of just like listing what happened, which can get really dry really fast.
Yeah. I loved hearing you say various elements of the story being load bearing or not. And that, especially with an Atavist story or a short story, you got to be, very economical with the anecdotes you employ for the story. So be it yourself or with Sayward, how are you interrogating the whether a piece, no matter or a moment, no matter how much you love it, does this bear load in the story?
Short answer is having been on the side of editing other people's scripts and stuff. As a writer, sometimes I'm like, oh, that's an editor's problem. And I think this is all important, and you're going to have to convince me that it's not. So thank you, Sayward, for dealing with multiple rounds of that, which definitely happened. But yeah, I mean, again, I think going back to like what's actually moving the story along versus what is stuff that I find interesting color. And you always need a little bit of that. You always need a little bit of extraneous like detail that color things in. I'm trying to think of like an example of what was cut out that I can refer to, but there were there's a lot of interesting to me at least details about the like voir dire and just the preparation for the trial. Buffalo and Camden were, from what I can tell, actually innovative legalistically. It was one of two of the first examples of I think what we would call scientific jury selection. Like they really put a lot of thought, like volunteer workers like put a lot of thought into like studying the demographics of the area, going out and trying to convince people and like soften up the jury pool, just to kind of spread their argument throughout the radius, people who could potentially be selected as jurors, but also they tried to figure out like demographic information of like who was going to be most likely to feel negatively about the war and positively about war resistors. If I'm remembering correctly, and I don't think this is 100% proven, but I think I remember them saying that like the ideal voter was like a middle-aged Jewish mother, and I really like the idea that they were just shooting for a jury of 12 Jewish mothers, but and I think it's fascinating that they went into all this and like that was a very big part of this resistance action was this like legal innovation, but yeah, we could tell the story without that. And I think as long as the like I hope that we conveyed like just the overall idea of like how the defendants and their attorneys approached it, and you cannot lay out all of the specifics of what they went into, but like I guess maybe it's like, if you take it out and you're like, if I explain this to someone, they'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds like what they would do. Maybe like, but without it being something that as you like, the whole thing falls apart when you take it out.
Yeah. What's a piece of advice, writing advice that maybe a mentor has shared with you, or maybe just hard earned through your career that is something you employ or offer other people too who might seek advice from you?
I think what I got to go with is an Ezra Pound quote, and I know that Ezra Pound was a fascist. Unfortunately, he could write, and I have a mentor and friend of mine, Ron Smith in Richmond, Virginia, who is a big fan of Pound's writing, and who kind of drilled this quote into me: "No ideas, but in things." And I have it on a post-it note on my above my desk right here. I come back to that all the time because it is so easy for me, and I think for a lot of people, to just for your writing to become detached from the material world, and to start. Is sophistrating a word? I don't think that's a word, but like it's very. I think it's really helpful for me to remind myself, like, almost every sentence, every paragraph, this like where is the physical stuff in this? Like, what are we actually talking about? If there isn't a physical object in this, what are we referring to? And there are obviously so many instances in which it's important to write about ideas. For fiction and creative nonfiction, to me, I have this quote on my wall because if I'm reading through something and I can't really point to like the connection to the physical, then I'm like, I could probably lose this, or I could probably illustrate it in a much better way that does actually give people an image in their mind, and attaches it to the world around us.
Yeah. I think Roy Peter Clark writes about another person who coined this term, but it's like going up and down the ladder of abstraction. And so the more you're at the bottom of the ladder, it's concrete and physical. It's kind of like what you're talking about. And when you're down there, it's tactile, it's physical, it's easily understandable. Climb that ladder, and now you're starting to get into some ethereal stuff that's not as easy to grasp. And you might lose your reader if you're not like super like tethered to the material in some way that is just like so arresting in the prose. Otherwise, it's like better get down the ladder and ground this thing.
That's a great way to put it. And I think it was also Pound who said go in fear of abstractions, which is a corollary to that. I think it was Pound. But I think about that just as often. Go in fear of abstractions. Like it's not that you can never have a good abstract thought or sentence, but like, do you actually, or even if you think you do, could you get an object in there? could you get some that helps me a lot. I just because it's very easy to lose track of that.
For sure. Nice. Well, I love bringing these conversations down for a landing by just asking the guest for a recommendation of some kind, just something fun that you're enjoying that you want to share with the listeners out there. So I'd extend that to you, Stephen. Just what are you liking? What are you digging that you want to share with the listeners?
Yeah. I mean, I got to say the music of Brian Eno. I've just been engulfed in Brian Eno's like early to mid 70s albums for several years at this point. Has anyone ever said oblique stratagems as an answer to this question? Are you familiar with those?
No.
Eno and I think it was Robert Fripp, his collaborator, came up with this set. You can buy them as like a box set. They're called oblique stratagems. It might be strategy, but and they basically, it's not really one method. It's like just a bunch of kind of off the wall methods that they came up with in the studio to break out of writer's block, or just to like make sure that they were like mixing things up. And they really run the gamut. Like one of them is honor thy error as hidden intention. So like keep your mistakes, or at least like think about them as being intentional, even if they weren't. And that's like pretty practical advice. One of them is like a very small object, its center, which I still don't really know what that means, but it's something to consider. Sometimes it's like, switch the instrumentation around. Like, should the verse be the chorus? Should the chorus be the verse? Like, it's called oblique, I guess, because it's just meant to take you off of whatever track you were on and put you on another one. And it might not be good. You might realize that the other one was better, but like, kind of shifting your frame of reference. So I think those are cool. And yeah, I just have to say Brian Eno went on an absolute tear, and I don't think people understand it. Here Come the Warm Jets, Taking Tiger Mountain by Strategy, Another Green World, and then Before and After Science. He's known for producing like Bowie and U2. He's known for making this more like ethereal, atmospheric music, which he invented, and it's wonderful. But the man could write a pop song. I'm a huge Beatles fan, and discovering those 4 albums, I felt like I just discovered like 4 more Beatles albums that like
cool.
bridge the gap from like Abbey Road to like Talking Heads. Check out Brian.
Oh, amazing. Oh, cool. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for sharing that and for this amazing piece you've done for the Atavist. It was really cool to talk about, the piece and how you went about it. And just thanks for carving out time to do this. This was awesome.
Thank you. This was so fun. Really appreciate it.
Yes. Awesome. Pretty fun stuff, right? I think so. I think that since this is a bonus episode and there will be a new one in a couple days or tomorrow, I don't know when this is running, I'll save my parting shot until then. I will say thanks for the kind notes I received from Melanie D.G. Kaplan, Paul Willits, Adam Swords, Pablo Arazariz. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, Pablo, but forgive me. There's a double R in there, so I know I got to roll my R. And Amy Brooks. Anyway, nice notes from people who saw me licking my wounds and were like, it's okay there. Stop licking the wound. Put a Band-Aid on it. Stop pouring salt in it, goddammit. I will further couch that I know rejection is the norm, but this felt like a round peg, round hole kind of deal, and it's a book proposal rejection, which means it was a year of work and waiting, unlike a rejection for a feature pitch or something, which can come pretty quickly. And that's the quick and dirty. That's the quick and dirty of it all. A book rejection is almost like physical in its demoralization. But who knows? There might be some interest out there. I think I'll just keep picking away at it. And then maybe the proposal and the story will take greater shape. Maybe there'll be a bit more ballast that'll make it a bit more of a sell. So I'm not going to put my whole person behind it, but I think I'll just chip away. We'll see. I have to have a conversation with Susan, my agent, whenever. Who knows? She's kind of hard to pin down. So we'll see what happens. And she might say, who knows? An editor might just pluck it up and we're off to the races. But it might be one of those things, you might want to choose a different subject, in which case, yeah, I'll back burner this, keep picking away at it, shelve it for a little bit. Go to something else. But who knows? There might be some interest. And that's where we're at. You see, I'm in it with you, man. Getting the shit kicked out of me. Throwing bows. Be sure you're subbed up for the podcast and considering joining the rage of the internet, Pitch Club, over at Substack. Welcome to pitchclub.substack.com. If you want to get better at landing your stories. I've got some good ones coming down the pike. So hopefully that'll carry you through the spring and the summer. And then you can tell me all about the amazing stories you've written because Pitch Club helped you out. All right? So stay wild, CNFers. If you can't do interviews, see ya.